Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I've prepared another Marvel Omnibus list for all of you. That's right, today I've prepared what I believe to be the 5 best Silver Age Marvel Omnibus editions. When I think of the Silver Age of comics in general, I just don't think anyone captured it quite as well as Marvel Comics. And these oversized hardcover comic editions are wonderful to read some of these early stories. I can't wait to talk about some of my selections here, but before I do want to shout out the channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up some of your own comic book collected editions, maybe even some of these omnibus editions, definitely check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see something you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's list. To kick off today's list in no particular order, we're going to be talking about the Incredible Hulk Omnibus Volume 1 from Marvel Comics. Yes, this is where it all began for our favorite green monster from Marvel, although he used to be gray. Anyway, this is a fantastic look at the early origins for the Hulk. We have Stan Lee, we have Jack Kirby, we have so many more. Those first 5 or 6 issues to me are some of the best of this early Hulk run, and honestly, it's great to revisit the origin story for the very first time. Bruce Banner, getting caught up in a gamma explosion trying to save the young Rick Jones, becomes this gigantic monster of a man. It's really a fascinating look at the origins of this character who is absolutely haunted, in many ways cursed, by the presence of the Hulk. I really enjoyed these early issues where we have the Grey Hulk before it transitions to the more typical green we've come to know and love. I also think it's fascinating how the Hulk was approached in these early days. Rather than being triggered by anger, he's really triggered by the day-night cycle. And there's a much more kind of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde feel to the whole thing that I feel like in subsequent years is maybe lost in some ways. But honestly, right from the jump, this is such a compelling character. This atomic explosion releasing this new monster onto the world, it's just really fascinating to see. And yet, in the beginning of this story, we have him as such a misunderstood character. I really like what we have here. We're introduced to Thunderbolt Ross and Betty Ross. I really like these origins for a lot of the mainstays in the Hulk universe. I already mentioned as well Rick Jones, who becomes this sort of pal or sidekick who tries to kind of help out the Hulk, especially in times of transformation or when people are out to get him, particularly because he credits him for saving his life. It's fascinating to see the trajectory of Rick Jones throughout the Marvel Universe from this point on, and I'm still learning about that myself, but to see his origins here, it's just pretty cool. I really love this old school art as well. The Silver Age to me is the most iconic comic book art of all time. I'm not saying it's my favorite, I'm just saying when someone says comic book art, I go back immediately to the Silver Age of comics. And when I say Silver Age, I'm meaning mostly the late 50s through kind of the 60s or early 60s. This is really kind of that prime time age where Marvel really starts launching a lot of its mainstream titles. We have DC following suit by kind of refreshing a lot of their older heroes like the Flash or Green Lantern, things like that. It's just such a big comic boom time in the history of this medium, and again, I don't think anyone's done it better than Marvel, and I'm so pleased that they've released these omnibus editions into their library. To get reprints of all of these early issues in sequential order in this oversized colored format is just a dream come true. I remember reading some of these issues first in the Marvel Essentials line, which was a standard size black and white printing. It was printed on really rough paper, and honestly at the time was the only way I could read these issues. It's such a gift to have these omnibus editions these days. Next on the list, we're going to be looking at the Thor Omnibus Volume 1 from Marvel Comics. Another great book by Stan and Jack. This is admittedly a newer entry to my personal collection. I got it as a Valentine's Day gift from my wife. Thanks again, honey. In my mind, this is one of the most imaginative titles that came out of the Silver Age of Marvel Comics, and it's a really fun departure from some of the other fare. This definitely leans on a kind of higher fantasy genre, I would say, than some of these other works that maybe lean a little bit more science fiction. We not only have characters from the Norse pantheon of kind of mythology, but we have a lot of other fun, just Marvel heroes and villains. We have a race of different aliens that show up at different points. We have kind of rock creatures and so many more. One of the most fascinating aspects about this era for Thor in my mind is that we have Donald Blake, the kind of alter ego and vessel for Thor to inhabit throughout this early run. Some of this is abandoned as we get further in this character. I know they've revisited Donald Blake throughout different runs in modern history as well, but it all starts here, and honestly, right from the jump, it is a compelling character. I think as a comic book art fan, it's really cool to see Kirby's evolution as an illustrator across this omnibus depicting Thor, and it really makes me wonder if he enjoyed doing this title quite a bit. There seems to be kind of an energy and just, I don't know how to describe it. There just seems to be a lot of passion in the illustration, and I don't know how else to say that. I really think it's just some of the sharpest illustrations we have in the early Silver Age of comics, and I think it adds a lot of just creative fun overall. Like I said, leaning on a kind of mythological character, I think that there were already some built-in stories they could explore, just introducing some of the rest of that pantheon of characters. And yes, for those wondering, of course we have appearances by Loki in this volume, the trickster brother of Thor. I also just really like exploring these issues for the first time. Thor was never really someone I collected much of, so reading this omnibus, it's some of my first time through these early issues. I'm definitely a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I personally enjoyed the Thor movies, but that was one of my first just bigger exposures to this character, and I feel like I'm now just beginning to scratch the surface on this character's long-running comic book history. To that end, let me know what are some of your favorite Thor runs. I know I've dabbled in Walter Simonson, Matt Fraction, Jason Aaron, I'm still making my way through now, but are there other hits for you? What are some of your favorites? I'd love recommendations in the comments, especially if you're a Thor comics fan. Looking through this omnibus, again, I'm just really humbled to have gotten it as a gift, and honestly, while it's still in print, if you're interested in this character or you're trying to complete your own Marvel comic book Silver Age library, this might be a go-to buy for many of you out there. And hey, if you're still watching this video and you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I would just like to invite you to do so. I'm always doing comic book lists, reviews, hauls, unboxings, and things like that. Anyway, thank you for considering. Now let's keep going with today's list. Next up, we have the Avengers Omnibus Volume 1 from Marvel Comics. Now, this is one of my favorite Silver Age comic team books of all time. I think the only one that edges this out for me is the Fantastic Four, which I'll speak about in a moment. Now, this is the older printing of this Avengers Omnibus. They also reprinted this last year along with Volumes 2 through 4, and they did a first printing for Volume 5. At the time of this recording, I believe all 5 are still in print. So definitely try to snag them if you're interested. If you've watched my most recent haul video, I did just get these other volumes of the Avengers Omnibus, so I'm almost done reading this volume 1 as I record this video. But this has been a blast to work through. This is one of the ones I've read the most recently. As I said, I'm just about finished with this omnibus, so it is fresh in my mind. We not only have the formation of the Avengers, which initially started with Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, the Wasp, and Ant-Man, but we have the kind of first sort of changing of the guards of this team. We have the reawakening of Captain America into popular comics. We have Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch. We have Hawkeye all join the team. This first omnibus is such a pivotal chapter establishing this great superhero group. In my mind, this was really more entertaining than some of the other Silver Age books because this had a team dynamic. And so by the time we share the stage with all of the different characters, the sense of momentum and pacing, it just went a lot quicker. And I do think Silver Age comics, if you've never really read a lot of them, they can be a bit clunkier, a little bit dated. The narrative style is a little bit different just as far as how these stories are structured or set up. They can be more wordy and less illustration heavy compared to modern comics, but when we have so many characters to juggle between, I felt like the scenes just really picked up their pace. I really enjoyed that. I think that this run was a little bit breezier than, like I said, some of the other Silver Age titles, and for that reason alone, I would put it on this list. But then you have with that the fact that we get to showcase some of Marvel's greatest heroes all in single issues here. It's really, really cool to see. It also introduces a lot of great mainstay Marvel villains. I love seeing the introduction of Kang the Conqueror, for example, in the pages of this omnibus. This is really one that should be read by a lot of Marvel fans out there. I think also if you're looking to break into Marvel Comics and you want to start back in the Silver Age with some of these early runs, this is a great way to expose yourself to a lot of the mainstream characters or heroes you see within the Marvel Universe. Some people might prefer to start with individual heroes and then maybe go into a team book, but I think it could just be as valid to start with a team book and find characters in that team book you like to then pursue in their own individual titles. At any rate, I do think Avengers Omnibus is one to recommend, and especially while these are all in print right now, definitely consider checking out the Avengers run here. Very, very fun stuff. I know I've had a blast. If you're interested in learning more, I do plan to do a full review for this omnibus shortly on the channel, so stay tuned. Now, my knowledge of the Silver Age of comics is by no means exhaustive, and yet I can say without a shadow of a doubt my favorite Silver Age comics of all time, particularly with the Marvel comics, are easily Fantastic Four and The Amazing Spider-Man. So that's why I've included Fantastic Four Omnibus Volume 1 on the list today, another great Jack Kirby Stan Lee collaboration, and this is a fun one. I would say that this is the series that really put Stan Lee on the map and gave him artistic freedom to really pursue some of these other titles. At least anecdotally, I believe I've heard something to that extent. But yes, we followed this foursome into space as they get bombarded by cosmic rays only to return to the Earth forever changed. One of them has elongated powers, calling himself Mr. Fantastic. We have a teenager who can just turn into flame, the Human Torch. We have the invisible girl, Sue Storm, who can do exactly what it sounds like. And finally, we have the Thing, this gigantic rock monster, Ben Grimm. This team joins together to save the world, to explore, and to do so much more. And honestly, I really enjoy this book. I know what really set this apart from some of its contemporaries at the time is the fact that this is a real dysfunctional team. They're fighting with each other almost as much as they're fighting the villains, and that lent a sense of authenticity to this book, and as I said, really set it apart from its contemporaries. I think the art from Jack Kirby here is really fun to look at, but I will say, watching his evolution throughout the next couple volumes of this omnibus, it is really incredible just how much he grows as an artist and settles into these characters. I would go as far as to say some of his early illustrations in these first few issues are kind of crude or rough to look at, but by the end, they've already really developed themselves, and by the subsequent omnibuses, it gets just even greater. Especially once we get inking by Joe Sinnott, it just is a whole new level of great comic book art. But we have a lot of great foundational stories here. I think Fantastic Four was another vehicle that really introduced a lot of mainstream Marvel characters. I know down the line we introduced characters like Black Panther in the pages of Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer, to name a few, and the list goes on and on. This omnibus collects the first couple adventures from these heroes in this beautiful oversized format. Again, this is an older printing as it's one of my eldest omnibuses, along with things like Avengers and Amazing Spider-Man, which you will see in a moment. I think that this one's definitely due for a reprinting. I know they've also released the Epic Collection that includes these first handful of issues, but you can find them in different formats, things like that. But this is easily one of my favorite Marvel titles. Like I said, I really love the team dynamic we get here. We have just a bunch of dysfunctional characters that are always in each other's faces. We have some great superheroics, some good science fiction kind of exploration storylines, and frankly, for the Silver Age, it rarely gets better than the Fantastic Four, at least in my mind. Don't miss out on Marvel's first family. And of course, I can't talk about Silver Age comics without talking about my personal favorite, The Amazing Spider-Man. And here is his first omnibus here from Marvel Comics, printing the first, 30 or 40 issues of this book, along with his premiere in Amazing Fantasy. Spider-Man is of course the story of Peter Parker. an orphaned, nerdy teenager who gets bitten by a radioactive spider only to develop amazing powers. Like the dysfunctional Fantastic Four, there had rarely been a comic book superhero that had this much tragedy and sense of kind of self-esteem issues and trying to figure himself out. This was a deeply conflicted teenage character that I think a lot of the audience could identify with in many ways, and it really set the main titular character apart. Obviously, Spider-Man has since become a cultural icon and is arguably the flagship character of all of Marvel Comics in general. He also boasts, in my mind, the most impressive rogues gallery of villains, on par with someone like Batman, I would say. Easily some of my favorite villains, and this first omnibus introduces most of his best-known villains. Really like the stories here. I also love the supporting cast of characters we get early on, like Aunt May, Uncle Ben, some of his friends at school. Really just a good setup here. Also can't talk about the Amazing Spider-Man without mentioning the legendary Steve Ditko. His art is really striking in this collection. There's so much more personality to his facial expressions than I see with a lot of other Silver Age work, and I just really love it. There's a kind of vulnerability to this art as well. I don't know how else to say that. I don't know if because Peter Parker is so kind of aw shucks down on his luck all the time, he just feels more emotionally available, and I can see that in the very art Ditko presents. I really love this book, and I think for a Silver Age title, it feels perhaps the least dated of them all. Of course, it is still an older book, so we can't just disregard that completely, but it has this freshness to it that I really think has withstood the test of time. As a Spider-Man fan, reading his origins are an absolute must that I would recommend to just about everyone. There have been recent reprintings of this omnibus. I'm not sure if it's still in print, but if you can find copies, I do recommend this edition. It is pretty wonderful. There are also standard size paperback editions you can get in the form of Epic collections when they're in print as well. But these issues are just timeless in my mind, and as I think about the Silver Age, I could not do a video justice without mentioning Amazing Spider-Man. Even as I review some of these pages, I am remembering just how much I really loved this time with Spider-Man. This whole initial run can be read just back to back to back and really never get old for me. Yes, the adventures are largely episodic without really broader, gigantic story arcs that pay off, even though there are some maybe plot runners or character development we see throughout. But honestly, the adventure here is worth taking. If you're a fan of Spider-Man, please go back and read some of these early Silver Age issues. I think they're a must-read. And that's going to do it today for our 5 best Silver Age Marvel Omnibus editions. These are just a sampling of my favorite Silver Age titles from Marvel Comics. But maybe I've missed yours. What are some of your favorite Marvel Silver Age books? And honestly, if you're a fan of the Silver Age in general, what are some of your other Silver Age favorites? Maybe throw out some DC Comics recommendations. My knowledge of their stuff is a little bit more tenuous than what I have here at Marvel, but I know they definitely have some goodies as well. And for anyone watching this who really only reads modern comics, an extra thank you for sticking with me so far. Let me know what you think in the comments, or if you've just enjoyed this video, I'd love to hear about it. Honestly, I'm really enjoying making these lists for all of you, and I really wanted to spend some time looking back at comic book history and examining the Silver Age of comics. I hope you've enjoyed the ride, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, that comment we talked about, and maybe check out another video on your way out. Thanks again and have a good one.